Welcome to scheduling in SQL Server. With scheduling, obviously you're working with dates, and if you run a business, you'll probably have clients or employees who use your services or work on a one-time or consistent basis. And in SQL, the function to use to calculate a future date or dates is the DateAdd function. The DateAdd function takes three arguments: the date part, which could be the day, week, month, or we could also, if you're using time, seconds, hours, etc., and the numerical amount you want to add to the date. So maybe 5 days, 10 days, 6 weeks, what have you. And finally, the initial date that you're going to add to. So here I have a variable service date, and that's the date I'm going to use in the DateAdd function, and setting the value of the service date to February 12th, 2025. So here are the three arguments. The DD, which is the date part, stands for day, 1 day, and then the amount. So I just want to add 1 day to February 12th, and obviously here's the variable. And when I run it, the select statement, the result is February 13th, 2025. So I added 1 day, and I get obviously 1 plus February 12th equals February 13th. And next, if I want to add a 1 week to February 12th, I run select date, add week 1, same service date, and I get February 19th, 2025. And if I want to add 2 weeks to this service date, I just change the 1 to a 2, and I get February 26th, 2025. So 12 plus 14, 26. And finally, if I want to add, like make that a little bigger, if I want to add 1 month, I just change the week to month, the date part to month, 1 month to the service date, and I get March 12th, 2025. Now, say you have a client or employee that comes on a consistent basis, say every day, every other day, once a week, every other week, every 4 weeks, once a month, etc. And you want to map out or see their schedule for a prolonged period of time in the future. What you want to do is make use of the while loop. So here I have I've added the variable counter with the data type integer, and I've got the client start date, and the counter initial value will be 0. Start date February 10th, 2025, and the client name will be Mike Smith. And I'm going to have a temporary table called virtual services, and the client and service date and their data types. And the loop will start with a condition of less than or equal to 5. So the loop will iterate until the counter is less than or equal to 5. So it begins, and first it inserts the values client, and then for the service date, it's going to have date add and day of the week, not every day, but day of the week. So I only want, obviously Monday through Friday. And then the counter, at first it's going to be 0, and then it's going to add that to start date. So it'll just start off with the 10th, but then it's going to keep adding a day until the counter is less than or equal to 5. And then the loop ends once the condition is met. And then finally, I'm going to select the values from the virtual services, and let's see what we get. And and we get 6 days of data. So the loop first to start off, the counter value was 0. So at the beginning, the counter value was 0, so it added the initial date of February 10th. Then the loop ran, and the counter value was set to counter plus 1, so 0 plus 1, then it became 1. And so then in the next time iteration, the value of the counter is 2, so it adds 2 days to the start date. Then it loops again, and the value is 3 now because 2 plus 1. Then it loops again, and then the value of the counter is 4. Then finally it loops again, and the value of the counter equals 5. So 5 days were added each time insertion or iteration from the start date. So from the 10th to the 11th to the 12th to the 3rd, 13th, 14th, 15th, until at this point the value of the counter is 5. So the condition is met and the loop stops. Now, say you have a client that comes once a week or weekly. All we have to do is change the date part from the DateAdd function to week. And now the DateAdd function adds 1 week. So it starts off with the initial start date, then adds 7 days or a week, goes up to the 17th. Then the value of the counter goes up to 3. So then it adds, or to 2, it adds 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, and 4 weeks, then 5, stops at 5, less than or equal to 5. Now, what if the client or employee comes in bi-weekly or every other week? Now, this gets a little trickier. This time we're going to multiply. You can use the asterisk symbol to multiply the counter value by 2, and that's going to get added to the week. So the first iteration, it'll just be 0. But then after the first loop or iteration, the value of the counter will be 1. So it'll be 1 times 2, which is 2. So it's going to add 2 weeks to the start date. And then after that, it's going to be 2 plus 1. Or sorry, 1 plus 1, that'll be 2. And then it's going to add, sorry, it's going to be 3. It'll be 2 plus 1. Then it'll be add, the value of the counter will be 3. I'm sorry, 2. And then it'll be 2 times 2. It'll be 4. So it'll add 4 weeks to the start date. And then the value, it'll go up again to 3. And then 3 plus 1 equals 4. And so it's going to add 4 weeks to the start date. And then 4 plus 1 equals, sorry, 4 plus 1 equals 5. And it's going to be 5 times 2. And it's going to add 10 weeks to the start date. It's a little easier to see with the results. So we see here, first it puts in the start date, and the value of the counter becomes 0 plus 1 equals 1. So it adds 1 times 2. It's 14 days or 2 weeks. See, 2, you get February 24th. Then the value of the counter goes up to 1, and it becomes 2. 2 times 2, that's 4. That's 4, so it's going to add 4 weeks to the start date, and then you get 10, or March 10th. And the counter goes up to 3, so then 3 times 2, so that's 6 weeks added to the start date, and you get March 24th. And the value of the counter goes up to 4, so then you get add 8 weeks. So then you're up to 8. Now we're up to April 7th. And finally, the value of the counter becomes 5, and you get 10 weeks added to the initial start date. And we wind up at April 21st. And next, how about if the client or employee comes in every 3 weeks? So this time we want to increase by, or iterate by 3 weeks. We want to add 3 weeks to the start date, and then another 3 weeks to that value, and another 3 weeks to that value, and so on. So first the counter is 0, so we get February 10th. Then the counter becomes 1, 0 plus 1. We add 3 weeks or 21 days. We'll get March 3rd. Now the value of the counter is 2. We're going to add 6 weeks to the start date, and we're going to get up to March 24th. Next, the value of the counter is up to 3. So we're going to add 3 times 3 is 9 weeks to the start date. And we're up to April 14th. Next, the value of the counter goes up to 4. We're going to add 4 times 3 is 12 weeks to the start date. Now we're up to May 5th. And finally, the value of the counter comes to 5. 5 times 3, 15 weeks to the start date, and we get May 26th, 2025. And lastly, we come to monthly. And so for monthly, we're going to go back and just use the counter value because we just want 1 month added to the start date. So first 0, and 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and the loop stops. Fairly straightforward. Okay, that does it for scheduling in SQL Server. Thanks for watching.